From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thanks for listening to the Wildcast podcast here on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app, along with other podcasting platforms like Apple and Spotify. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review the Wildcast podcast today. Justin Spears, Michael Lev coming at you to start off the week. Arizona ends non-conference play 2-1. Now it's time for Pac-12 play. The Wildcats move ahead to their Pac-12 opener in Berkeley on Saturday against the Cal Golden Bears. We're going to talk about that game and give our predictions and go into that game in detail on Thursday with sports editor Ryan Finley. But we're going to take this podcast to look back on Arizona's gutty win over North Dakota State. We're also going to talk about Herm. Hello? You played to win the game. He was fired by ASU. Or I wouldn't say fired. The quote was relinquished his duties. We'll talk about that and also answer your mailbag questions. Appreciate all of our listeners who participated in our Monday mailbag, so we'll answer all of those later on. But Lev, after looking back on the North Dakota State game, there's a lot of things to unpack. You went into game film on Sunday. You provided your 5 takeaways. Ultimately, how do you reflect on how Arizona was able to pull this off? Because it was looking like, man, the Wildcats are going to fall to another FCS team for the second year in a row. They might go into the Pac-12 play 1-2, which was realistic going into the season. But Arizona really dug deep, and they gutted this one out.
They did. And I give a lot of credit to the defense, which faced a tall task against North Dakota State. They just have a unique offense, one you don't see very often. I kept track of every formation that they threw out there against Arizona. I mean, 33 times with 2 tight ends, 11 times 3 tight ends, 3 times with 4 tight ends, and it was always kind of different formations too. Sometimes they're in the shotgun, sometimes the tight ends are on the wing. They just did a lot of stuff, and they were moving the ball pretty consistently against Arizona. And I don't know if it was, an adjustment or just a case of sheer will or, diagnosing the plays that were coming. But at the very end, the last 5 plays from scrimmage that the Bison ran only gained 3 yards. Yeah. Arizona was able to stop them, turn the ball over on downs, then force a 3-and-out in between, touchdown pass from Jaden Delora to Jacob Cowing, ball game.
Yeah. And as you said after the game, it was probably the most entertaining game we've seen at Arizona Stadium in a long, long time. And it was so fascinating, too, because North Dakota State, we heard that they were going to bring a large contingent of fans, but I wasn't expecting the entire west side of Arizona Stadium to have a bunch of yellow shirts. Like you said, Lev, it was a really good call. It kind of felt like a bowl game in a way, where everyone behind Arizona's bench was all wearing red and blue, but then on the west side of the stadium where North Dakota State's bench was, right behind them, it was like probably 70% Bison fans and 30% Arizona fans, or 65-35, but majority of them were definitely North Dakota State fans.
The near miss last year against Washington was not a well-played game. It was kind of an ugly game. I think Arizona had 62 yards passing in that game.
Yeah.
The victory over Cal, not a well-played game, not like a aesthetically pleasing game at all. I mean, tons of turnovers and injuries and all kinds of stuff.
The Bears were depleted because of COVID.
The opener against USC in the COVID year was an entertaining game, to be sure. I think it was like 34-30 or something like that, but there were no fans in the stands.
Hunter Echols played in that game.
He did. So there was like no atmosphere. This one had... it was well played. It was back and forth. It was interesting just to watch like the different styles of play. Like I said, you just don't see that offense anywhere ever anymore. I mean, I think it was Hunter Echols during the week who had compared it to Stanford somewhat, but Stanford was never this extreme.
No.
And I mean, North Dakota State threw 12 passes the entire game. They got sacked once, so that's like about 13 pass plays or so. They ran the ball the rest of the time. I think the stat on PFF was 10 of their 12 passing attempts were off play action.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's just different from what you see anywhere else. The crowd was great from both sides. I mean, it got noisy on third down for both teams, which is really cool. And I just think it's a big step forward for the program when you're able to overcome all of that stuff and come out with a win.
Absolutely. So Arizona gets the win over North Dakota State. They finish non-conference play 2-1, like I said. But when you think about just the first 3 games of the season, what do you think Arizona's identity is so far? Because now they have a competent quarterback in Jayden de Laura, who kind of seemed like he fixed his woes from game 2. Because game 1, he was very impressive, came out, threw 4 touchdown passes, looked like the quarterback that Arizona wanted to be. But then in game 2 against Mississippi State, you saw him. I mean, he had his moments, but then there were a lot of times where he could have tucked it and run and picked up 10 or 12 yards and moved the chains. Instead, he didn't. He was forcing a lot of passes. Jedd Fisch said, we're going to clean it up. I talked to him, and we're going to kind of figure each other out still. We're still in this process where we're learning each other, and I'm going to talk to him about it this week, and we're going to clean that up. And then lo and behold, on Saturday against North Dakota State, he has his career high in rushing. Not just at Arizona, but we're talking about Washington State. So I think Jayden de Laura now is really starting to figure it out. I love the quarterback play so far for Arizona. I think Jayden de Laura is going to be a star this year. Defensively, I think Arizona is much improved. There are still flaws, as we saw against North Dakota State. They still allowed 283 rushing yards, and they kind of got bogged down. You saw a lot of hands on hips. But when it mattered most, Johnny Nansen got his defense ready, and they were able to find a second win and put something together late in the game, which you haven't really seen with an Arizona football team in the last several years. So I think the identity of this team so far through 3 games is that they got grit, and I think that's going to carry them this season because I guarantee all season long they're going to be underdogs.
Dan Campbell would be proud.
Grit, baby. Grit.
I love Dan Campbell, by the way. Just go on the record.
He's
Did
awesome.
You see that thing last night or yesterday? The lineman who had never started a game.
Skip!
Just I love that stuff. That's what's so great about football and sports
in
general. But I agree with you. I thought Jed made an interesting point after the game about, it's not always going to be pretty. Sometimes it might be, sometimes it might not. They might win a game on offense. They might win a game on defense. They might win a game on special teams. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to be locked into like one element of the game as kind of the identity of your program. I would say under Rich Rod, it was probably offense, right? Running the ball. They could always run the ball pretty much no matter what, even when things weren't going well. But they were never great on defense. I think Jed, coming from the NFL, he understands the value in having a well-rounded team. And he's pretty hands-off when it comes to defense. He kind of lets those guys do their thing over there. And he, is in charge of managing the offense. And he's kind of shifted the duties around with special teams and put that on Jordan Paopau's plate this year. But you got to be able to do everything well. And, to try to find a way to win games. And as we know, when you're a team like Arizona, and even when you get competitive, you're probably going to be in a lot of close games. Yeah. Right? A lot of one-score games where a few plays here and there make the difference. And those plays could happen in any aspect of the game. I mentioned at the top. I mean, it was 5 plays, 5 stops that they got at the end on defense after kind of being steamrolled for 55 minutes. Yeah. That really, really made the difference in that game.
All right, so we have specific questions in our mailbag relating to the game. So we'll get to those later on in the podcast. But, Lev, let's talk about Herm Edwards being out at ASU. After the Sun Devils lost to Eastern Michigan, which was a stunner, I thought ASU was going to go in there, handle their business, and finish non-conference right. But Eastern Michigan coming down and stuns the Sun Devils, and in result, Herm Edwards not fired. They're not using that word. And Jedd Fisch said in his press conference earlier today that coaches don't ever like to hear the F word. Well, Herm didn't hear the F word. They're just going to say, hey, we're going to relinquish your duties, and we're going to move on from it. So I think that this was their way of saying, all right, we're moving on from Herm Edwards, but we're going to figure out a way to buy him out. But, ASU, they have a winning record under Herm Edwards. They've gone to bowl games under Herm Edwards. So it's not like it's been a complete train wreck. And Herm Edwards looked like he was starting to get the program off the ground. But then NCAA investigation came in when they were, hosting recruits during the dead period, during a global pandemic, pre-vaccination. So that's pre-vaccine. So that's when, it was right in the heart of the pandemic. It was a huge, it was an awful look for Arizona State. And it's been a dark cloud that's kind of plagued them, and it's been hovering over them for the last year or so. And ASU got depleted in the transfer portal. Players were jumping ship left and right. And I always thought that ASU would move on from Herm, Lev, but I thought it would be in the offseason. I thought that after the Territorial Cup, or if they squeaked into a bowl game, that they might have moved on from him. I'm really shocked that Ray Anderson and Michael Crow would move on in the middle of the season, but I'm not surprised that he's relinquished his duties.
Is Ray Anderson next? I mean, that's a question you have to ask yourself. Is he going to be the one who's in charge of making this hire? My bet would be that he isn't. I'm with you. I'm surprised it happened at this point. There were a lot of issues with this program. NCAA investigations aren't what they used to be. They've kind of lost their teeth in a lot of ways because a lot of the stuff that used to be quote unquote illegal is now legal with NIL. But what they did crossed the line. I mean, I remember when we discussed it, when the news first trickled out, I had never in my life seen other coaches go on the record calling out stuff that another program had done. I think David Shaw was quoted as saying, like, man, this is wrong. Like, you can't do what they did. They kind of, got rid of some of the guys who were, intimately involved in those shenanigans.
Including former Arizona Wildcat, Antonio Pierce.
Yep. Such as Antonio Pierce. And Antonio Pierce, on the other hand, was the guy who was kind of doing all the recruiting for them. I mean, I'm looking at the 2023 team rankings here for the Pac-12. Right? ASU's last in the Pac. They have only 6 commits. 6 commits for the class of 23. UCLA also has 6. They've kind of overtly gone to hey, we're transfer you.
Yeah.
Chip Kelly's not super into recruiting, which is kind of hard when you have this job. Cal only has 7, which is also a little bit weird. Everyone else has
Arizona's like
13
20, right?
or more. Arizona has 19.
Yeah.
They lost a ton of guys, as you mentioned, in the portal. I like Herm Edwards. I think he's good for the sport. He's great with the media. He's got a certain positivity and energy about him. I think he probably was a good mentor for a lot of these kids. But if you're not into recruiting the way that Jed Fish and his staff are, you're not going to succeed in this sport.
Yeah.
It's just a must. And I just think that he's a little too old and a little too NFL for him to succeed in that particular area. So I guess the question now is, what direction do the Sun Devils go with this hire?
Antonio Pierce? They hired him.
Right.
Bring it back. But I mean, we talked about ASU being this quote unquote sleeping giant for a long time. And it's been underwhelming because ASU, they're right in Phoenix. They can just recruit in their backyard and have a solid team year in and year out. I mean, all the kids that are coming out of the Phoenix area, a lot of them are going to the Big Ten, going to the SEC, going to the Big 12. Like, they're all leaving the Pac-12, and they're all coming from LA and also Phoenix.
To that point, of those 6 guys that they have committed, none of them are from Arizona.
Yeah.
None. 0.
Yeah. And you have access to all these kids, the Hamiltons, the Chandlers, like these football programs that Arizona is tapping into and bringing down to Tucson. ASU has been whiffing on them. Antonio Pierce, I thought, did a great job of really kind of fencing off LA, because for a hot second there, ASU was pulling in some of the best recruits from LA, like Herm Edwards' first year. They had a bunch of 4-star guys, and they're all from the Los Angeles area, from the Las Vegas area, and then you couple that with the players that they have now. Like, they were really trending in the right direction, but then the story came out, the bombshell, that ASU was hosting recruits during the dead period, and Herm Edwards reportedly, again, this picture hasn't been leaked, but there have been reports out there that Herm Edwards was taking pictures with recruits during the dead period. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. This was during the COVID-19 pandemic pre-vaccine. When we're encouraged to not be around each other as much as possible. And if you're the coaching staff, you're exposing yourselves to these kids who could possibly have it. And didn't ASU have a couple of COVID issues during that year? So it's just like, God, it's a train wreck. And I think that Herm Edwards kind of lost control of his guys. He put a lot of trust into Antonio Pierce and his assistants, and they got reckless. And here's what we got.
So I was listening to another podcast this morning. I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's the one with Dan Wetzel and Pat Forty.
Oh, great
Ross
podcast.
Dellinger.
Yeah. Love Wetzel.
Anyway, Dan suggested Deion Sanders.
Yes.
As the next coach.
Prime time in Scottsdale?
Arizona State.
Oh, man.
It makes a lot of sense in that he will recruit. And he is young and he gets it.
He's going to play up the Scottsdale factor, the way that Pete Carroll played up Hollywood at SC.
Yeah, he undoubtedly would. It's a good fit on a lot of levels. The question you have to ask, though, is, how long would he stay there? I mean, if the Florida State job opens, I mean, is Deion gone? Is he going to be committed to being out here? We were talking before the pod today about like Georgia Tech as maybe a destination for Deion, who played much of his career with the Atlanta Falcons. So I don't know if that would make sense, but I do think that whoever the next coach is, that's going to be someone young. I would be very surprised if the next coach is over 50.
Not John Gruden.
No, it's not going to. I don't
Not
think
from one
can
ESPN analyst to
go.
another.
Yeah, can you go the NFL/ESPN analyst route again? I think Urban Meyer. I don't think Urban Meyer is going to coach again.
No,
I don't think he's going to coach anywhere. And if he does, it would have to be a really specific college town situation where he wouldn't be under the spotlight.
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green.
Full circle.
Yeah. Bowling Green, which beat Marshall, I believe, this past week after Marshall beat Notre Dame. So I don't know what that says about.
They ruined my
Green.
14-leg parlay.
Oh,
yeah.
That seems complicated.
I lost $5.
Someone who can recruit. And can recruit Southern California, can recruit the Phoenix area. They've really let that aspect get away from them, and it's just especially if you're going to lose people in the portal too, you got to replenish the talent.
Yeah.
And I came into the season saying that was a flawed team in a lot of ways. I couldn't understand the win projections for them compared to Arizona. Who knows? They might end up being around even, but with this happening now, I mean, ASU's in trouble. I mean, it's gonna be a long and difficult season for them.
Somebody mentioned Kalani Sitake, but I'm like, why would he leave BYU? Because they're going to the Big 12.
Yeah, why would he leave?
They have a plan where everyone else is kind of like, well, we don't know what's going to happen with the Pac-12. I don't understand why he would leave.
I mean,
to go to
if
ASU.
BYU was still a quote unquote Group of 5 school, and you could move up to a Power 5, but
they're well respected now. Because
BYU's going to the Big
Sitake.
12.
Yeah.
Where are ASU and Arizona going to end up? We don't even know.
Yeah. Could
Could be the Big 12, could be the Pac-10, could be the Pac-12 with newcomers, or something else that we haven't thought of yet. I do think that is an attractive job where you can win. I don't understand why they can't. Like you said, great talent base, more players from Phoenix than ever before.
All the direct flights to Sky Harbor.
Tons of direct flights to anywhere and everywhere. Fun campus, right? Mill Avenue is a blast. Great weather during the winter months. Someone should, if they get the right person, they could turn that into a big time winning program. So interesting to see how this all unfolds. Not a good day if you're an Arizona fan who roots against ASU. I don't think this is a good thing.
No,
because the next coach, might do a better job than Herm did.
Absolutely. Kenny Dillingham, Oregon offensive coordinator, former Sun Devil. That's my pick. It's my dark horse for the coaching search. All right, let's move into the mailbag. Monday mailbag. We had a lot of submissions. We appreciate all of you who submitted questions. Let's get right to it. AZ Cats Go asks, any news on Rayshawn Luke's injury? Also, why are we not rotating on the D-line? We only use 3 DT the entire game. I thought Nansen said that would be a point of emphasis. So to first answer the initial question, any news on Rayshon Luke's injury, they're still trying to figure that out. He was seen in a walking boot after the game, but Jed Fish said that a lot of times they use the walking boots just for precautionary reasons. Even though that he is the fourth guy on the pecking order of Arizona's running back rotation, he's still a very important part of this offense. He had a huge run against North Dakota State late in the game, but so far we haven't heard anything in regards to his injury.
Yeah, no specifics yet. It was one of those plays where he got tackled low from behind, and oftentimes that's where ankle sprains will occur. Hopefully it's just that. It's not something to do with his foot. It's been my experience with track guys that they're kind of finely tuned athletes. They're kind of like sports cars, Ferraris. And one little thing goes wrong, and they're kind of, it's a little different for them, for track guys versus like pure football guys who might play through anything.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see. I mean, he hasn't played that many snaps. I mean, does Arizona need him this season, given how many other effective running backs they have? No, but it sucks for him.
Yeah.
Because that was the best play that he's had so far. They're trying to figure out how to use him. He can definitely be a weapon for them. So I would say they'll take their time.
Yeah.
They're not going to rush him back out there. He could appear in 4 games this season and preserve a red shirt. And we'll also have to see if there are other running back injuries, which there inevitably will be, which kind of changes the calculus a little bit. As far as the defensive line rotation goes, I agree with whoever tweeted that
AZ
question.
Cats go.
Yeah, AZ Cats go. That's been a little disappointing. I feel like every defensive coordinator who comes in here promises that they're going to rotate players, and then they don't really follow up on it. It's kind of it's a campaign promise kind of thing,
Just like tight ends.
Get yourself elected. Tight ends?
Well, now, not anymore.
Tight ends is kind of happening a little bit. A little bit certainly more than last year with the emergence of Tanner McLachlan, who hopefully we'll get to talk to one of these days because he seems like he has a cool story. But one thing that affected the rotation is the injury to Tia Savea. Got hurt in the first quarter against Mississippi State. He's the 4th defensive tackle. So he was unavailable for the rest of that game. He suited up, went through warm-ups. They decided to hold him out against North Dakota State. So that reduced the rotation of veteran defensive tackles to 3, right?
Yeah.
So as a result, you don't have as many bodies in there. Tank Wilson's really the only one coming in. Not ideal against a team like NDSU in terms of the style of play. On the other hand, they don't play fast. They ran less than 60 plays.
Yeah.
Some teams will run 80, 85 plays. So, I think it would be better for the defense to have a more robust rotation in there. And I think if Savea is available this upcoming week, which he should be, that you'll probably see more of that against Cal.
Brad Malone, huge supporter of our podcast. We appreciate Brad a lot. He asked, I'm puzzled why the Scummies, meaning the Sun Devils, waited 3 games to let Herm go with the pending investigation. What is your take on this, and who would you hire if we were at Tempe Normal? Well, we kind of answered that earlier. In terms of candidates, yeah, I mean, I say Kenny Dillingham is probably going to be a dark horse, the Oregon offensive coordinator. Is he going to get the job? I don't think so. I think he still needs to show himself a little bit as a coordinator. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where ASU is going to go. Like you said, young guy who embraces NIL, guy who embraces the Scottsdale lifestyle that can sell to recruits. I think they'll do a good job there. All right, David H. says the running back room seems much improved. Who has impressed or surprised you the most so far out of that group? Man, that's tough.
I would have to say Michael Wiley.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's just he's the best all-around guy in that group. The best pass catcher for sure. He's been way better once he gets the ball in his hands as far as breaking tackles, running away from people. I really liked how he handled the very last run of the game. It was 3rd and 3, and they ran kind of a stretch play to the right. And as soon as the second he saw that opening, he stuck his foot in the ground, charged upfield, put his shoulder down, got 9 yards, iced the game. I'm a big fan, as we all know, of Jonah Coleman, who was impressive from day one in spring. Kind of got off to a slow start in training camp. I think he might have been a little bit overweight coming in, but he's gotten his weight down. I just really like how hard he is to tackle. I mean, you're just not going to bring him down with the first guy. And he's very slippery. He's really good in between the tackles because he's short and he can get small, as they say, in those tight spaces. We haven't really had a lot of DJ Williams the last 2 games because he's, like I said, after the first game, he's kind of their closer. And they were behind against Mississippi State. It was a back-and-forth game against North Dakota State. I think if you're in that 4-minute offense mode, or late third quarter, early fourth quarter, that DJ is going to play a really prominent role in that area. So that would be kind of the order I would put them in.
I'm combining these two here, and it's about linebacker Jacob Manu. So DS 670560039, what a handle. He asked, am I missing it? What has Manu done on defense? I don't get it. A lot of times he is getting outplayed. Am I wrong? And then I'm combining that with Winston Dan's tweet, who tweeted, has Jacob Manu earned a starting spot on the defense? Not a question, but it was great to finally see some tight end action. So he's loving Tanner McLachlan and his improvement. But let's talk about Jacob Manu at linebacker spot.
Yeah, I don't really understand this idea that the tweeter is presenting about, like, what has he done? This was the first time he played. I mean, he played a few snaps here and there defensively prior to this past week. So how would you even know what he's done or hasn't done? I thought from watching the game that he was really aggressive, sometimes overly aggressive. They definitely got him on that first touchdown pass to Hunter Lipke. Everybody bit, and Lipke slipped out of the backfield. It looked like Manu was probably the guy, if that was man coverage, who was supposed to take him on that route up the sideline. But hey, true freshman, guy who arrived here in June, making his first career start, there are going to be some mistakes. And he made a really good play. He in one of those 5 plays at the end of the game, he was involved in making one of those stops. And he was fearless. I mean, this is a young man playing against grown men out there, an undersized linebacker going toe-to-toe with these, like, 6'5", 300-pound
corn-fed,
5th and 6th year seniors, on the North Dakota State offensive line, all their tight ends, their fullbacks. So big ups to Manu. I think Colby Cage will continue to start at weak side linebacker, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if the two of them shared time at that position, assuming they go back to that nickel look.
And Jacob Manu was a guy that wasn't really expected to have this kind of role going into the season. Like, if you talked about the Servite kids, you would have said, okay, the guys who are going to make an impact in year 1 are going to be T-Mac, Kean Burnett, Noah Fafita when he's in as a backup quarterback, and then Jacob Manu. I think Jacob Manu might earn himself, bump him up a spot over Noah Fafita because he's going to get more snaps this season.
Well, he could get more snaps than Kean Burnett the way things are going.
No kidding.
Tanner, it's really through no fault of Burnett's, but Tanner McLachlan's been too good to keep him off the field.
Yeah.
He's shown good ability to get up the seam. He's been a reliable target. Seems to have a good connection with Jaden DeLora. I'm sure Kean will get some opportunities at some point this season, but Tanner has earned that spot.
Yeah. All right. AZ Cat John tweets, Johnny Nansen has game planned well. Discuss. Also, Coach Fish getting cowing on a linebacker at just the right time. Brilliant. Discuss. Is that second one the 4th down play where he kind of did a banana route or a bow route?
Yeah, I called it a bow. Jed Fish called it a bubble.
Okay.
Bubble screen. But it was definitely an audible situation.
Is he talking about that play specifically?
4th and 1.
Yeah, cowling on a linebacker? Was a linebacker?
Oh, no. Okay, cowling on the linebacker was the next play.
Okay.
So we had the audible on 4th and 1 where they shifted things around a little bit. They had trips to the left, and they altered the way they lined up. And then the two inside receivers kind of ran slants to create what I would call a natural pick.
Yeah.
And that opened up that outside area, and he threw the ball, kind of hit a little bit, tiny bit high, but a good play, good catch, got the first down. Okay. So then the next play, somewhat similar to how against San Diego State, like when you see that matchup against the linebacker, like green light. This time instead of, against San Diego State, it was kind of like fake to the outside, go straight up the seam. This was a corner route. Jaden had to elude a pass rusher, stepped up in the pocket, drifted to his right a little bit, and it was cowing against number 42, I think it was, and that's going to be a mismatch. He beat him to the corner. Jaden was able to hit him. The fortunate part about that play is Sam Lange was, I think, playing left guard,
yes,
and his assignment was to come across the formation to pick off like a defensive end on the other side. He fell down and then kind of like, almost didn't quite grab the guy, but kind of stuck his arm up to kind of trip him up.
Yeah.
It would have been, I feel like it would have been easy for the officials to call a penalty on that play. Luckily, they did not, and it resulted in a touchdown, and good on Jaden for recognizing that when you've got cowling on a linebacker, that's something that you have to exploit.
But his first point, and talk about AZ Cat John, he said Johnny Nansen has game planned well. Definitely had a solid game plan against San Diego State with their joker lineup where they put 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, and they went toe-to-toe with San Diego State, and they embraced their bully ball and kind of gave it back to the Aztecs. Mississippi State's second half, Will Rogers was kind of picking them apart. I would think that Arizona's defense has improved a lot compared to last year, but as we've seen through the first 3 games, more so the previous 2 games, that there's definitely some flaws with this team. Yeah,
I think Johnny's had a really difficult job so far this season. You go from the air raid to North Dakota State's offense. From one week to the next, what a huge challenge from a game plan perspective. One team is going to throw 70 to 80% of the time. The other team's going to run 70 to 80% of the time. One team doesn't use any tight ends. The other team uses 2, 3, and 4 tight ends, and sometimes with a fullback as well. So things will kind of like normalize, quote unquote, as we get into Pac-12 play. Obviously, everybody's a little bit different, but nobody is that different.
Yeah. Joseph 52 asks, maybe premature, but assuming Delora comes back next year, how long can we keep Fafita on the bench? Dude is a gamer that we need to keep happy for the future of the program. Does he sit for 2 seasons with the talent to be a starter?
Yeah, this is
a really good question.
Yeah, it is. This is always the challenge.
I've been like, hey, we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen, right? You never know. Jaden Delora could have an unbelievable season and decide to enter the NFL draft.
Yeah,
Jaden Delora could suffer an injury, and Noah Fafita comes in and plays unbelievably well, and then the job is his. These things are very fluid and unpredictable. Jaden has 2 years of eligibility after this one if he wanted to stick around for all that time, which these days, that's a long time for a quarterback to wait around. You just don't see it. The guys transfer. They want to play, and you understand it, but and Arizona's going to bring in another highly rated quarterback in the next class, and they're going to bring in another one in the class after that because you have to keep the cupboard full. So good question.
Really good question.
Can't predict the future. Don't know what's going to happen, but definitely like to have viable options at that position. And it feels like they've got at least 2, maybe 3, maybe even 4, if you include Will Plummer in that mix.
Gopher the W asks, chances we go bowling. Well, Arizona, they're at 2 wins now. They need 4 to go bowling. I feel confident that they're going to get that 2.5 season win total. But go bowling, man, that's going to be very, very tough because now Pac-12 play, you got to go up against Utah, USC's, the big boys of your conference.
We had this, this when you looked at the schedule, you kind of saw this difficult 5-game stretch in the middle. I would say it's now a 6-game stretch because Washington State's on the tail end of it, and they're 3-0 with a win at Wisconsin on their resume. So I would say that in order for them to go bowling, they're going to have to win the games that they can win / should win. Okay, so I'm going to say Colorado for sure.
Cal, too.
ASU. Cal is the third one. Okay, not going to be easy. They're not favored. I think Cal's pretty decent. They're a well-coached team. They're going to be really motivated, too, after losing to Arizona last year. So if they're able to win all 3 of those, that gets them to 5 wins. Then they'd have to pull off an upset somewhere among those other 6, which is definitely not impossible. But I would say, put a percentage on it, Justin, 30%.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
I'd say that's probably a good percentage. All right. We got to quickly go through these to end the podcast here, but Not the Fake Marco. Great name. How has Mississippi State and North Dakota State covered Jacob Cowing differently? Has scored and caught balls in all the games, but receptions and yards are lower after game 1.
Yeah, I figured after that first game that he was just going to get more attention.
Yeah.
It makes sense, right? I mean, like, if you're going to devote a safety over the top or as a second defender to anyone on this team, it's going to be Jacob Cowing. And they didn't even target him in the first half of the game. I don't know if I can't see. I don't have the access to the all 22 film, so I don't know if he was open or not on any of these plays. But I also think they're not going to force the ball to him because they don't have to.
Yeah.
You kind of felt that way at times last year. Like, if we don't get it to Stanley Berryhill, like, we don't really have a lot of other great options. But Dorian Singer has looked pretty darn good. T-Mac, not that as many opportunities, but when he has had them, he's made the most of them. Should have had 2 catches in that game. That I don't know why that one wasn't reviewed down there inside the 5. Tanner McLachlan, as we've talked about, is another guy who's emerged as a pass catcher. Michael Wiley. So I think patience is a wise course of action here, and he was able to put up 5 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown in the second half of that game.
Dave Matola, this is our last question for the mailbag. Dave Matola asks, how many times did NDSU fans tell you they won national championships this past week? I don't think they need to.
They don't need to.
They know.
I've got nothing but respect for that program and their fan base. As you said before the game, never seen a visiting team represent to that extent at Arizona Stadium, maybe aside from ASU, which is just a 2-hour drive down the freeway for most of those fans. So I have no problem with them touting their resume. They were a very good opponent and they easily could have won that game if they played in the Pac-12, even with 20 fewer scholarship players. They probably go around 500.
Yeah.
That's how good they are. So nothing but props to North Dakota State from this end.
Props to the Bison. All right, well, that would do it for this Monday episode of the Wildcast podcast. We'll be back later on in the week with sports editor of the Star, Ryan Finley, as we get ready for Arizona versus Cal. Pac-12 opener in Berkeley, 2:30 p.m. kickoff. That man over there, Michael Lev, is very happy about that. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Wildcast podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to find all of our content on Arizona Wildcats football on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app.